Chapter 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chu Yang heard a ruckus outside, a faint chorus of mourning. Holding incense, woo woo woo, incense ascends to the sky, ah ah ah, New Year's paper on the door, hey hey hey, white banner on the next door, brother's gone, sister kneels and cries, weeps for him 7 times over. So irritating. He hated being woken up like that. Chu Yang sat up abruptly, glaring. A few people, men and women he vaguely recognized, sat scattered around the room, decorated as a makeshift funeral home. In the center, a short, plump woman in a white mourning hat gaped at him, eyes wide with terror. Beside her, a little girl in mourning clothes knelt on a futon, dark eyes darting as she stared at him. She chirped, brother, brother, star. Chu Yang was amused. He didn't expect a kid to call him brother when he was only 30, he opened his mouth to say, hey. Then the woman in the white hat screamed, oh, my God. He's back. Her eyes rolled up, and she fainted with a thump. Am I that scary? Chu Yang was annoyed. He considered himself a reasonably handsome and charming young guy. Is this some kind of joke? But looking at the mourning hall setup, that wasn't likely. Oh, God, Chu Laoyo's family is back from the dead. Oh, sweet Jesus. God, protect me. Don't let that ghost find me. Damn it, a chilling possibility struck Chu Yang, a sudden, ominous feeling. No way. Mirror. Where's a mirror, star? Chu Yang rummaged through a rectangular wooden box and finally found a mirror covered with red cloth in the bedroom behind the mourning hall. He lifted the cloth and stared at his reflection. A jolt went through him. What the? Host's emotional state detected. System activating. Hey, you hear about the Chu family? He came back to life. Weird, right? They say he jumped right out of the coffin. Spooky. Yeah, I heard he was scared half to death. I saw his wife washing his underwear at midnight. I thought the old Chu family was done for. Guess not, huh? If you ask me, the He family's days are numbered. Inside the main room of a small fisherman's house in Natudu, on Joy Island, Chu Yang slumped on a recliner, ignoring the stares and whispers of passers-by outside. He looked utterly defeated. This couldn't be happening. How did he end up in some time travel plot? As one of the original group of people to be compensated for demolition in Shenzhen, Chu Yang's life had been a breeze. His parents were alive and well, he had plenty of money, his wife hadn't cheated on him, and his mother-in-law wasn't a pain. The only thing that fit the time traveler profile was that he was 6 feet tall. Damn it, that's all it takes, star. Chu Yang's mind was blown. According to this body's memories, it was now 2007. The unlucky guy he'd landed in was also named Chu Yang, living in Natudu, a fishing village on Joy Island, near Quancheng. This Chu Yang had a classic tragic backstory. His parents had died at sea years ago, leaving him and his little sister, Chu Shi, who wasn't even in school yet. He'd gone to college on insurance money and landed a soul-crushing office job in the city. He thought he was stuck in that kind of rut, then a phone call about a demolition completely changed everything. Xiao Lu, good news. A seafood processing plant wants to build a factory. They're interested in your land. Come back and sign the contract. So, Chu Yang rushed back home and signed the demolition agreement that day, but before the money arrived, he'd gotten up to pee in the middle of the night, slipped, and fallen into the sea, becoming a ghost of Blood Harbor. Then came Chu Yang's soul entering the body, the coffin dance, and the funeral hall disco. I guess fate's been kind to me. A demolition household in 2 lifetimes. Chu Yang sighed, unsure whether he was lucky or not. Just then, a flash of light nearly blinded him. Daily treasure chest refresh. Claim treasure chest now. A translucent screen only he could see popped up with a line of red text and an exclamation point. This was the perk he'd gotten with time travel, a mysterious system with no instructions. He had to figure it out himself. So far, it refreshed and gave him a treasure chest to claim every day. Claim it. Chu Yang resigned himself to his fate. If he was stuck here, he'd better make the most of it. If God was nice enough to give him a new world and a system, he wasn't going to disappoint. Congratulations. Black iron treasure chest awarded. New location locked. Please claim treasure. A map resembling a crude GPS interface appeared on the screen. Crap, star, Chu Yang was annoyed. You have to go get the treasure chest yourself. As Chu Yang considered the scorching sun outside, debating whether to venture out, a skinny girl with a ponytail peeked in from the doorway. Brother. The girl said timidly, hands behind her back. Chu Yang stood up, a complicated expression on his face as he looked at the girl. As an only child, he'd always envied people with siblings. Somehow, his dream had come true. Brother, are you hungry? I brought you something to eat. Seeing Chu Yang staring, hesitated. Chu Yang noticed the small white plastic bag behind her back, containing 3 buns. Oh, thanks. For a moment, Chu Yang didn't know what to say. He took the buns. Brother, eat up. I'm going to my uncle's place. Chu Yang remembered that after his parents died, Shi had been sent to live with his uncle, Dongnan, while he was at college. She had stayed there for years. He and his sister only saw each other for a few days each year at Chinese New Year. Okay, go ahead. Chu Yang nodded. As she turned, he blurted out, be careful, sis. She stopped, turned back, and smiled sweetly. Okay, brother. Maybe it was the bond of blood, but Chu Yang felt his mood lift. He opened the bag and scarfed down the buns, stuffed with cabbage and leftover oil. Chu Yang patted his stomach and burped. Eat, drink, and be merry. Time to get to work. Chu Yang had a clear goal now, enjoy his new life. Since time travel was a done deal, he'd take care of his little sister and make this world their own. First, he needed to find that treasure chest and see what kind of fortune awaited. With a renewed sense of purpose, Chu Yang grabbed a sweatshirt, pulled a bamboo hat over his head, and headed out into the yard. The sun was shining, and the scenery was perfect. Chapter 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Turn left in half a mile. Treasure chest respawn point ahead. Under the scorching sun, Chu Yang felt like the broken seashells paving the fishing village path were practically radiating heat. Damn, it's hot as hell. He'd barely walked a quarter of a mile and was already drenched in sweat. He was starting to regret coming out. Maybe he should have waited until nightfall, but turning back now felt like giving up. He wasn't about to sweat for nothing. Natudu was a tiny village, barely 100 families, 1,000 people tops, where everyone knew each other. Chu Yang walked down the road, recognized by many, but no one approached. After all, the whole fake dead in the funeral hall thing was still pretty scandalous news in a small fishing village like this. Chu Yang didn't mind. He just kept moving. Soon, he passed the last house and arrived at the beach on the north side of the island. It wasn't the picture-perfect golden sand you'd imagine. This was a tidal flat, mostly dark, silty mud, but for the island's fishermen, the northern tidal flats were far more valuable than the southern beaches. They used them to track the tides and plan their trips out to sea. Finally, Chu Yang scanned the area and spotted a ball of silvery light near the mangrove trees at the north end of the flat. That had to be the system's treasure chest. Wanting to confirm whether the chest was only visible to him, Chu Yang hatched a plan. He called out to a middle-aged woman digging for snails, "Hey, Aunt Zhang." Aunt Zhang straightened up. "Oh, it's Chu Laoyou's kid. What brings you out here?" Your whole family is Laoyou's family, Chu Yang thought to himself. Just bored at home, figured I'd take a walk. After some small talk, Chu Yang pointed towards the treasure chest's location and exclaimed, "Holy crap, Aunt Zhang, what's that shiny thing over there?" Aunt Zhang squinted in that direction. "Nothing, just the mud flat." "You seeing things?" "Seriously?" "You don't see anything?" Convinced she wasn't playing dumb, Chu Yang dropped the act. "Guess I was wrong." He turned to leave, but Aunt Zhang called out again. "Hold on a sec, Chu Yang." "Yeah." "Listen, good news. You're still single, right?" "Well, I just happen to have a niece who's also on the market." You know. Aunt John was nobody's fool. Even though Chu Yang's parents were gone and he had a little sister, he was a college grad with a city job, and now the village was slated for demolition. When the payout came, he could buy a place back in the city. House and a job, real city living. These days, a city address was worth its weight in gold, but Chu Yang wasn't stupid. Aunt John was way too eager to connect her niece with him. Aunt John, I just remembered, my dog's about to pop any minute, gotta run. See ya. Your rice pot's so empty cockroaches starve to death, you don't even have a dog. Hey. Without looking back, Chu Yang left Aunt John in the dust and hurried towards the treasure chest. It was nestled beneath a small clump of mangroves. Chu Yang reached into the ball of light and a cold tingle shot through his fingers. Then, with a bang, a black treasure chest materialized. Black iron treasure chest opened. Reward, random marine life, common, *5. Capture time limit, 60 minutes. Chu Yang knew all about marine life, it was what he ate. The common part was easy to understand, like item stats in a game. It was the capture time limit that bugged him. Seriously? This thing was like the Rift Herald, vanish if you didn't eat it fast enough. He hadn't brought any tools. He was supposed to catch stuff with his bare hands. Total BS. Chu Yang could only hope the system wouldn't be that cruel, but time was ticking, so he immediately started poking around the mangrove roots. He had to see what treasures this chest had spat out. After a few minutes, he'd unearthed plenty of tiny snails and hermit crabs, but nothing special. Just when he was about to curse the lousy system, he noticed a faint glimmer of light in a hole by his left foot. Could it be? Never hurts to check, but as he crouched in front of the fist-sized hole, Chu Yang hesitated. He had seen a lot of live broadcasts about sea catching, but he had never done it himself. Who knows what kind of critter was living in there? What if he reached in and got his hand bitten by a poisonous critter? I wonder if sea snakes count as marine life. Glancing around, Chu Yang broke off a sturdy red branch. He'd test the waters first. Okay. Taking a deep breath, Chu Yang slid the branch into the hole. His body tensed, ready to jump back at the first sign of trouble. Okay, the hole was deep. He slowly pushed the branch in, until it reached the bottom. *thunk, star, the odd sensation at the end of the stick sent a jolt of excitement through Chu Yang. Feels like a shell. He poked it again, harder this time. Whoa! Suddenly, a strong force tugged at the branch, as if something inside was trying to wrench it away. He almost lost his grip. Chu Yang instinctively grabbed the branch with both hands and yanked. He felt something fly out and land on the mud with a thud. It was a huge crab lying on its back, green saw-edged shell, white belly, yellow claws. A blue crab. A monster blue crab. This was a good sign. Blue crabs were known for their tender, delicious meat, especially the roe. Chu Yang had eaten plenty in his past life, but they were all small, a quarter to half a pound at most, but this one had a shell bigger than his face, claws as thick as a baby's arm, at least a pound and a half. A real prize. Think you can escape? The crab was fast. It flipped itself over, brandishing its claws, and scurried back towards the hole on its 8 legs, but Chu Yang was faster. He stomped down on the shell and lifted the giant crab in his hands. Got it, he grinned, seeing the blue crab still trying to wave its claws threateningly. A sea catch. He did it himself. This was brag-worthy material. After admiring it for a moment, Chu Yang tore off a strip of bark and, remembering something from a video, tied the crab's claws to keep it from pinching him. Then he bound its 8 legs together, securing them 6 times. Saw-edged blue crab. Perfect. Chu Yang was satisfied with his handiwork. He was still far from a rope art master, but it was his first time. He was confident that, with practice, he'd become a regular rope art master in no time. Chapter 3. You are listening at novelfull.audio. With a little experience under his belt, Chu Yang, the newbie fisherman, quickly located a second crab burrow. This one was seriously hidden, the narrow entrance practically invisible beneath a tangle of black, hairy algae. He only found it thanks to the system's guidance. Otherwise, there was no way he would have spotted it. He doubted anyone could, not even a seasoned pro, now that he'd found the hideout. Snagging the crab was a piece of cake. He soon hauled out another big blue crab. It was smaller than the first, but still tipped the scales at over 2 pounds. With his second catch, the system registered *3 marine organisms, and nearly half of his allotted time was gone. Gotta hustle. Chu Yang ripped off his shirt, stuffed both crabs inside, tied the sleeves around his waist to free his hands for easier maneuvering. 5 minutes later, he found his third big blue. This one wasn't holed up in a burrow, but chilling under a reef. Thinking fast, Chu Yang snuck up from behind, grabbed its shell, and went to work with his increasingly practiced knot tying skills, holding the crab. He gave it a once-over and a mental weigh-in. Yep, bigger than the first, with a smooth, blue-black shell. Its back alone was over 6 inches wide, and it had to weigh at least 4 pounds. It would be a giant even by farm-raised standards. As the sun climbed higher, the last 2 blue crabs also fell victim to Chu Yang's hunting spree, but nabbing the last one came with a surprise. The bark strip he was using was too thin, and it snapped when he was tying the big claw. The blue crab didn't hesitate. It nailed Chu Yang's middle finger. Pain shot through him, and he almost cried out. After finally yanking his hand free, he saw a nasty gash about an inch long on his finger. Damn it, Chu Yang spat on the ground. Making money from the sea was great, but it wasn't without its dangers. After a quick patch job on the wound, Chu Yang started home, his impromptu crab sack bulging around his waist. He ran into Aunt Zhang at the village entrance, returning from her snail-digging expedition. Chu Yang, honey, I'm telling you, think hard about my niece. She's a real looker. Aunt Zhang, don't sweat it. I'm good on my own. In his past life, his family had pressured him into marrying the CEO's daughter right out of college, a fast track to marital misery. This time around, Chu Yang wouldn't fall for that again. Marriage? No way. The ladies on the live streams were cute, and the games were fun. Seeing Chu Yang's resolute attitude, Aunt Zhang backed off. Her eyes darted to the suspicious bulge around his waist. Say, what's that you've got tied there? Before he could react, she was reaching for it. Chu Yang wasn't expecting that kind of pushiness from a village woman. She caught him off guard. Thump, starred at a huge crab tumbled out. Aunt Zhang's eyes went wide. Whoa, that's a big one, and it wasn't alone. Where'd you get these? Chu Yang glared at the nosy woman, shoved the crab back into his waistband, and hurried away. Hey, why are you leaving? College grads are so stingy. Aunt Zhang called after him, completely unapologetic. For her, shame was a luxury she couldn't afford. That kid caught all those crabs in no time. He must have found a crab nest. I gotta go take a look. The thought of the potential fortune dangling from Chu Yang's waist, easily 1,000 or 800, made her eyes gleam with greed. Back at his place, Chu Yang reached his front door. He didn't know Aunt Zhang was already raiding the mangroves for crabs, and frankly, he wouldn't have cared if he did. Big blue crabs were a matter of luck. That beach was scoured clean every day. Without his system cheat, she'd never find anything. Screech star, the old wooden door, coated in green moss, groaned open, setting off the shell wind chimes in a tinkling chorus. Chu Yang went into the yard and released the 5 crabs into his fish pond. It was more like a pit, really, about 3 by 6 feet and 3 feet deep, lined with stones. Lots of fishermen had one in their yards. He hit the water pump for a quick shower and gulped down a bunch of water, feeling the heat subside. Then he collapsed on the vine recliner for a well-deserved rest. He'd been out in the midday heat, hiking miles and digging for crabs for over an hour. He was beat. Chu Yang was getting a taste of the hard life of a fisherman. Dragging his tired body onto the chair, he enjoyed the salty sea breeze and the tinkling of the wind chimes until he drifted off to sleep. When he woke up, the sun was setting. Outside the courtyard wall, a giant orange-red fireball blazed in the sky, reflecting off the rippled sea, coating it in a layer of broken gold. Breathtaking. Maybe that was how Falling Sun Island got its name. Chu Yang took a deep breath, and suddenly, the laid-back fishing life seemed to have a certain appeal. Still, pretty views didn't fill an empty stomach. Seeing that it was dinner time, Chu Yang had a problem. He couldn't cook. His past self might have known how, but cooking wasn't just about memory, it was about practice. If memory was enough, everyone with access to a recipe website would be a master chef. Guess I'll go see what's around. Chu Yang resigned himself to trying his luck, but he couldn't find a single restaurant in the entire village. Natudu was just a tiny fishing village, not many tourists bothered to stop by, so who would even visit a restaurant? The fishermen all cooked at home anyway. A few people he knew offered to share their dinner, but Chu Yang wasn't dumb. They were just being polite, and if he took them up on it, they'd resent him. He'd walked a few dozen yards when he suddenly stopped near a yard enclosed by a wooden fence. According to his memory, this was his uncle Hidongnan's place. Maybe I should stop in for dinner. Family was family, right? Chu Yang thought it couldn't hurt to try, but before he could act, he heard yelling from inside, followed by the crashing of dishes. Eat, eat, eat. All you ever do is eat. I can't keep you fed. You're a good-for-nothing, you are. That braised pork is for my hang-hang. You little brat, how dare you touch it? You even stole the leftovers from lunch. Just like your deadbeat dad. Get out of here. You're not allowed inside tonight. Then, Chu Yang saw a small, frail figure stumble out of the house. Tears welled in their eyes as they clutched at their clothes and huddled under the eaves. Like a weed blown by the wind, Chu Yang's mind went blank. Chu Shi. Chapter 4. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Bro. Chu Shi looked up and saw Chu Yang in the doorway, and chirped his name like a little kitten. Tears welled up and spilled down her cheeks like pearls. Chu Yang's own throat tightened. He rushed over and scooped up Chu Shi, who was sobbing. The commotion drew everyone else from the main room. Well, if it ain't our Chu family's college boy. Why didn't you eat again? The speaker was a rural woman in her early 50s, skin weathered and wrinkled, short and stout, a gaudy gold necklace gleaming against her neck. This was Lu Zuixian, Chu Yang's aunt. The sight of her face triggered a flood of memories, long buried. If his past life was anything to go by, this aunt was a piece of work. When Chu Yang's parents were alive, she practically moved her whole family in every few days for free meals. On his birthday, his parents went all out with a feast, even killing a chicken. Before the cake even came out, his aunt and uncle showed up with their kids and hogged the table. Chu Yang remembered getting a chicken wing in the head that night. His aunt said the wings would help him fly high, and the head would let him rule the world. Meanwhile, his two chubby cousins declared the drumsticks delicious. His mom teased him about it later, and the two families had a blowout and drifted apart. But after his parents' accident, Lu Zuixian suddenly reappeared, offering to raise him and his sister, not out of the goodness of her heart, of course. The insurance payout had left the Chu family with a hefty sum. Her condition for taking them in was that she hold on to the money for their upbringing. Whether it ever went toward that, who knew? Her own kids definitely got fatter, while Chu Yang paid for college himself, slaving away at summer jobs. Standing next to Lu Zuixian was a man, tall and thin with a hunched posture, maybe 5'7". This was his uncle, Hidongnan. Hidongnan had been injured years ago while working at sea, leaving him with a limp. He was insecure and generally had no say in anything. To Lu Zuixian's right was Yuanhang, a little chunk of a kid who was maybe 4'7" and weighed over 300 pounds. He was the younger of the two cousins. The older one, Yang Fan, was away at school in the county. Cat got your tongue. Is that how you talk to your elders? Seeing Chu Yang ignoring her to comfort his sister, Lu Zuixian's face soured. Chu Yang just smiled. The old him would have bitten his tongue rather than upset this woman, but he wasn't that guy anymore. He wasn't about to take that kind of crap. Hey, auntie, sorry, I'm starving and a little slow on the uptake. You asked the right question, though. I haven't eaten, so I came to see what you had cooking. He walked into the main room, still carrying Chu Shi. He spotted several plates on the table, fried cabbage, peanuts, kelp soup, and braised pork. Looks good. He grabbed a piece of braised pork and popped it in his mouth. Tastes good too. Ugly and mean as she was, Lu Zuixian could really cook. Here, Chu Shi, you should try your aunt's cooking. You're too skinny, you need to eat more meat. He plucked a large slab of pork belly and stuffed it into Chu Shi's mouth. Good. Good, bro, Chu Shi said carefully, then glanced at Lu Zuixian, whose face was turning purple, and quickly burrowed back into Chu Yang's arms. Insubordination. That's what it is, utter insubordination. Lu Tsuetian's beefy chest heaved like a giant inflatable bouncy house. When did this fatherless brat get so uppity? Who said you could eat my pork? Put it down. She charged at Chu Yang like a runaway bulldozer, but Chu Yang was ready. He tucked Chu Shi under one arm, clutched the braised pork in the other, and hopped back with a series of silky smooth moves. Any foreign martial arts fan who saw it would have been shouting kung fu. And awesome. Lu Tsuetian, meanwhile, had more momentum than brakes. She slammed straight into the wooden wall. Boom. Aunt Zhang, who lived next door, was eating dinner when she heard the crash, followed by dust raining down from the ceiling. She screamed, "Oh my God, it's an earthquake!" and bolted from the room. When she caught her breath and realized it was just Lu Tsuetian next door doing whatever she was doing, she went ballistic, yelling "Damn fool and son of a..." Lu Tsuetian wasn't about to take that lying down. "You're the idiot, you big baby, you eat dog food." She shot back. Words weren't enough. They started swinging, hair was pulled, belts were yanked, and the ominous signs of a full-blown brawl were everywhere. The instigator, Chu Yang, watched the fight for a minute, then used the chaos to slip away with Chu Shi, but Yuanheng saw Chu Yang leaving with the braised pork and grabbed his pant leg, snarling, "Pork! You better give me my pork, you little punk!" Chu Yang slapped him and kicked him to the ground. "You're too young to be so rotten. I'm doing your dad's job and teaching you a lesson." The kid was a bully who often tormented Chu Shi with Lu Tsuetian's backing. "Chu Yang, that's your cousin," He Dong Nan, who'd been silent until now, finally spoke up, worried about his son. "Cousin?" Chu Yang scoffed. "I only have a sister. I don't have a cousin." He turned to leave, but before he did, he glanced back at He Dong Nan. "Don't blame me for being heartless, uncle. Think about how your family has treated us over the years. Think about what you said and did back then. Do you think you're worthy of my dead parents, or the 300,000 yuan you stole from us?" He Dong Nan froze, his face flushing and paling by turns. He stammered for a long time, but couldn't manage a word. He just watched Chu Yang walk away. He Yuanheng, seeing Chu Yang disappear into the distance, started rolling on the ground and screaming, "Pork! I want pork! Wah! You're useless! If you don't get me the pork, I don't want you to be my dad anymore." He Dong Nan's eyes twitched. He slapped the kid again and again, as if trying to vent all the humiliation he'd endured over the years. "I'll give you pork. I'll teach you to be a brat. I'll teach you to talk back." Chapter 5. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After getting home, Chu Yang was still fuming, his face dark. Who knew there were uncles out there like that? Pitiful, infuriating, and spineless all rolled into one. "Brother, don't be mad. I don't need any more braised pork," Chu Shi said softly, tugging on his shirt. She figured her craving was what had set him off. "Nah, it's not about that," Chu Yang replied absently, realizing his tone was a little harsh. He knelt down, ruffled Chu Shi's hair, and forced a smile. "I'm not mad at you. Actually, forget it. You're staying here from now on." After the mess today, there was no way Chu Yang could let Chu Shi go back to He Dong Nan's place to live under their roof, not with that tank and his mother likely to abuse her. "Really, brother? You're not leaving?" Chu Shi's eyes lit up at his words. Even though she was young, kids from poor families grow up fast and understand a lot. Chu Yang was her real brother, and this was her home. Of course, she was thrilled to stay. "Yep, not for now," Chu Yang said, smiling. Then he started getting dinner ready, but after messing around for ages, he couldn't even get the fire going. "Brother, let me," Chu Shi said. Seeing he was hopeless, she struck a match to the dry leaves, then carefully added small branches, building up to bigger pieces of firewood. Once the fire was going, she started cleaning the stove, tiptoeing to pour water into the iron pot that was nearly as tall as she was. Watching Chu Shi busy and so capable, Chu Yang felt a pang of guilt. Girls her age were usually their parents' darlings, protected from anything even remotely tiring, let alone this kind of hard work. "Okay, brother, Once the water boils, we can steam the meat and you can eat, she announced. Okay. Seeing he wasn't much help, Chu Yang went out to the yard and fished out the second biggest blue crab from the fish pond. After scrubbing it with a loofah, he brought it into the kitchen. Steam this, too. Whoa, a blue crab that big. Chu, she exclaimed. Growing up by the sea, she knew a lot more about crabs than Chu Yang did, and she knew how rare one this size was. A crab like that could fetch a couple $100 at a restaurant in town. Brother, that's expensive, she said, swallowing hard. Chu Yang smiled and patted her head. It's okay, we'll steam it. I caught it today. There are more in the pond. Wow, brother, you're awesome. Chu, she nodded enthusiastically and put the tied-up crab, belly up, on a plate in the pot to steam. After skipping lunch, Chu Yang was starving, so he stoked the fire to get it roaring. Soon, steam was pouring from the pot. Okay, brother, time to eat. Chu, she announced, lifting the lid to peek inside. All right. Chu Yang tossed aside the fire tongs and hurried over to grab a plate of dark, glistening braised pork and a big, orange-blue crab, just the two of them. Chu Yang didn't bother with the table and set the plates on the stove. He stabbed a piece of braised pork and then picked up a chopstick of crab roe, moist, fresh, pure bliss. Eat up, quick, Chu Yang urged. Okay, brother. Chu, she smiled sweetly and dug into the crab legs. Is it good? So good, brother. I'll catch crabs for you every day, deal? Yeah. You're the best. After dinner, Chu, she started doing the dishes while Chu Yang sprawled out under the eaves to enjoy the cool evening air. Not that he was lazy, okay, maybe he was a little lazy, but Chu, she could handle the 2 plates. He'd been sitting there for less than 2 minutes when he noticed 2 flashes of light outside the yard, followed by the faint sound of wind chimes. Who's there? Chu Yang called out. It's me, your great-uncle, a man's voice answered. An old man in his 60s or 70s, wearing a blue polyester shirt, pushed open the gate and walked in. A middle-aged man with glasses followed behind him, holding a flashlight in one hand and a briefcase under his arm. Chu Yang recognized them. The old man was Hibaugua, the former head of the village for decades, and the man with glasses was Xiong Dague, the village accountant. Technically, Hibaugua was distantly related to Chu Yang's mom, so calling himself great-uncle wasn't a total lie, but Chu Yang wasn't buying it. As far as he remembered, Hibaugua had never given a damn about their family. This sudden show of kinship had to be for a reason. Hey Baugua and accountant Xiong. What brings you out here so late? Chu Yang asked, cutting straight to the chase. Xiong Dague pushed up his glasses and said with a nervous smile, well, Chu Yang, about that demolition agreement you signed yesterday, the head and I were wondering when you might be ready to move out. The village will compensate you once you do. Then Chu Yang remembered, his predecessor had signed a demolition agreement to get money, to buy a house, and become a city dweller, but that was his predecessor, not him. Oh, I'm still thinking about it. Hearing that, Hibaugua frowned a little. Come on, kid, you already signed the agreement. What are you hesitating about? Do you think I'd screw you over? Chu Yang wasn't swayed. This is a big deal. I need to talk it over with my sister. She has a stake in this house, too. She's just a girl. What's there to discuss with her? Hibaugua said dismissively. Besides, you already signed the paper. In the countryside, valuing boys over girls was still a huge problem. Usually, when it came to stuff like demolition settlements or land distribution, families always favored the boys, the girl. If she was lucky, her family might give her a small amount of money to send her on her way. Chu Yang didn't agree with Hibaugua's words at all, but Chu Yang was concerned about his urgency. It made sense that investors would be in a hurry to demolish, but what did it have to do with the village? Unless, remembering that his predecessor had signed the agreement and then accidentally fallen into the sea on the same day, Chu Yang realized things might be more complicated than they seemed. I'm not saying I won't move, but I was in an accident, you know. My head's all messed up. I forgot all the agreements I signed. How can I move like that? Chu Yang said, spreading his hands. What kind of memory is that? You think falling in the water can mess with your brain? He Baogua said impatiently, thinking Chu Yang was just trying to weasel out of the deal. Chu Yang shrugged, clearly not buying his act. Why don't you show me the agreement again so I can refresh my memory? Well. Xiong Dague glanced at Hibaugua, who reluctantly nodded, seeing that Chu Yang wasn't going to give in to pressure or persuasion. All right. Xiong Dague opened his briefcase and pulled out an agreement. Chu Yang took it and carefully read it under the dim light. As a former child of a family who got rich off of demolition, he knew a thing or two about those agreements and quickly spotted a few problems. First, the area under the eaves of the house hadn't been included in the main floor plan. Second, the yard had been paved with cement. But the agreement calculated the demolition compensation based on the price for bare dirt. Most importantly, the agreement had been signed with the village and stamped with the seal of the village committee. In other words, the village was confiscating Chu Yang's house and then using it as leverage to negotiate with the investor. Chu Yang put down the agreement, stared at the two men, and said slowly. Chief He, Accountant Xiong, something's not right here. Since when is the village committee allowed to confiscate land without permission? I'm pretty sure that confiscating a homestead requires approval from the local government, but I don't see the official stamp of the township government on this agreement. Without the official stamp, this agreement is invalid. Chapter 6. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Well. I mean. Xiong de Kue hemmed and hawed after Chu Yang started grilling him, not really saying anything at all. He knew he'd messed up. Chu Yang was the first real college guy from the village, seen the world in the city and wouldn't fall for the same old scare tactics they used on the other villagers. Hibaugua, on the other hand, turned red in the face, acting like the big-shot village party secretary and elder. Invalid? What are you talking about? Your signature's on there, plus the village committee stamp. Nobody better say it's invalid. They can come talk to me if they got a problem. Besides, I'm your grandpa, for crying out loud. Why would I screw you over? Alright, that's enough. You signed, so get moving. You'll get the demolition money when it comes. He glared at Chu Yang. Ha! Chu Yang just laughed in his face. Give me a break. This nobody village secretary was trying to throw his weight around. It was a joke. Back in his previous life, he hung out with kids whose parents were high-ranking officials, like, provincial officials. He used to call them uncle all the time. What did you say? You watch your mouth. Hibaugua was stunned, not believing Chu Yang would talk to him that way. Then he got furious. Hey, Chu Yang, you can't talk to the secretary like that. He is your grandpa. Xiong Dague chimed in. Knock it off, you. Get lost. I'm not moving. Chu Yang was figuring the house and yard were at least 4,000 to 5,000 square feet, including all the extra buildings. But the agreement was only offering him 200,000 yuan. That was less than $50 a square foot. Okay, so it was 2007, but even then, houses in Quanqing City were going for over 80 grand. The suburbs were 4 or 5 grand a square foot. Out here in the sticks. At least $1,000, plus you gotta factor in the demolition money, so where did the rest of it go? Chu Yang stared at his grandpa, face full of scorn. Fine. Big man now, huh? Getting tough, are we? Hibaugua glared at Chu Yang, pointing a finger at him. You'll be sorry. Just get out of here. If you weren't so old, I'd break your fingers. Chu Yang waved him off like he was swatting flies. Hibaugua was so mad he could barely breathe. He stomped off, muttering under his breath. Chu Yang shut the door, bolted it, and went back to relaxing in the yard. Just then, Chu Shi came out of the kitchen and sat down next to the recliner. Brother, are we not going to move now? She'd been listening the whole time. Nope. We're not moving. Mom and Dad worked too hard on this house. It'd be a waste to tear it down. Chu Yang pulled Chu Shi onto his lap, pinching her cheek and smiling. But Grandpa's really powerful. Chu Shi was worried. I'm more powerful, got it? You believe that? I believe it, brother. You're the most powerful. Chu, she said, completely serious. Ha! Let's go. I'll show you that big blue crab I caught today. Wow! A big blue crab. You're the best, brother. That night, around 9, she was already bathed and tucked into bed. Chu Yang didn't go to bed early. He was lying in bed, playing Snake on his phone. It was the king of phones that year, the Nokia N95. Nokia's new flagship phone had a double-sliding design for switching between entertainment and calls. It had music, videos, and games. It was expensive. Launched at the beginning of the year, it cost $62.88. Chu Yang only paid $628 because he bought it at Huiqiangbai, a knockoff king. He threw the phone aside and thought about life in this world. He wasn't getting that demolition money, and he wasn't going back to the city to code all day. He didn't even understand computers, plus it was useless to remember things without knowing how to operate. At least he had a cheat code. Tongzi was a reliable guy. He'd live well in this world with the treasure chest. He needed a solid foundation, and quick. He needed to make money, and fast. How to make money in 2007. Go to Beijing and buy an old house. Play the crazy stock market. Stock up on Bitcoin. He didn't have enough money for any of that. He had to return to reality and go fishing. With Tongzi, the sea was his treasure chest. He, Chu Yang, would become the king of the 7 seas. That night, Chu Yang dreamt he really was the king of the sea. He was surrounded by mermaids, clam spirits and abalone spirits. Hey, brother, wake up. The roof's leaking. Chu Yang was communicating with an abalone spirit when he woke up. Cold, he opened his eyes. Rain was flowing through the seaweed roof, dripping on his pants. No wonder the dream was so wet. What did you say, brother? Chu, she asked. Oh, nothing. Just wondering why the bed was so wet. Guess we need to fix the roof. Chu Yang rubbed his nose. Yeah, Chu, she nodded. He got up and changed. He went to the main room and saw 2 bowls of porridge, one big and one small, and a dish of pickled vegetables on the table. Where'd this come from? He asked. I borrowed the rice from Grandpa's son next door, and Grandma's son gave us the pickles, Chu, she said. Chu Yang nodded and sat down. Eat up. The rice porridge was smooth and thick, the pickles crisp and delicious. He finished a bowl in a few bites. After breakfast, Chu Yang looked outside. It was still raining, but not hard. Villagers in straw raincoats, carrying nets and shovels, rushed to the beach. It's the first day of the new year, and the tide's high. Everyone's going to the sea, Chu, she said. Chu Yang perked up. High tide. That means good stuff. He opened the system. The treasure chest had been refreshed. Open today's treasure chest. Congratulations. You've won the silver treasure chest. The location has been refreshed. It wasn't far from yesterday, still at the seaside, yes. Chu Yang was excited. Silver meant unyieldingness. It sounded better than stubborn black iron. Like Chu Yang, proud and unyielding, he grabbed Chu Shi. Let's go, sis. Let's go to the sea. Okay. Let me get the gear. Chapter 7. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Bro, come on. Relax, I'm coming. Point 2 figures in straw raincoats, one tall, one short, appeared on the village road. Chu Yang, being prepared this time, had changed into shorts and a t-shirt before putting on the raincoat, so he wouldn't overheat or get soaked. He'd brought plenty of gear for whatever he might find: scoop nets, tongs, rakes, shovels, plastic bags, and rubber bands, nets for fish, tongs for crabs, rakes and shovels for shellfish, bags for the hull. That way, no matter what the system threw at him, he'd be ready. As they approached the beach, they saw an older couple with weathered skin heading in the same direction, each carrying buckets. Grandpa's son. Grandma's son. Chu, she called out. It was their neighbors. Chu, she had even borrowed rice from them that morning to make porridge. Well, if it isn't Xiaoxi. Grandma's son slowed down when she heard Chu Shi. Headed to the beach? Yup. My brother's taking me. Chu Shi's eyes crinkled into little smiles, and she puffed out her chest as she replied. All right, let's go together. Grandma's son glanced at Chu Yang, smiled, and patted Chu Shi on the head. Chu Yang pulled out a pack of cigarettes and offered one to Grandpa Sunday. Now that's a good smoke, Grandpa's son grinned, showing yellowed teeth. He was a long-time smoker, but as a fisherman, he couldn't afford much beyond cheap tobacco. Smoking a pack of those nicer smokes was a rare treat for him. Truth be told, Chu Yang usually smoked the cheap stuff himself. He just splurged on these for the trip home. They walked and chatted as they went. Yang, why'd you and the secretary get into it? Grandpa's son asked. He'd overheard Chu Yang yelling at Hibagwa the night before. It's about the demolition, Chu Yang replied, flicking ash from his cigarette. They're offering me next to nothing for my place, yard, fish pond, trees, everything. Think I've never seen money before. He said angrily. That's just bullying. Grandma's son hadn't said anything yet, but now spoke up. This was what Chu Yang was hoping for. He knew that by tomorrow, the whole village would know Hibagwa was trying to lowball him. Gossip spread like wildfire in these parts, and it never stayed quite true to the original. The demolition was already a hot topic. Plus, Chu Yang and his sister were orphans. That way, if Hibagwa tried to pull any shady stuff, he'd have to think twice about the public outcry. They arrived at the north shore of the island. Chu Yang observed the water. Each wave that crashed was receding a little further than the last, leaving fish, shrimp, and crabs stranded on the mudflats. Some villagers were already chasing the waves with nets, hunting for these tide fish. Others were raking the flats, digging for shellfish and crabs buried in the mud. Yang, we'll see you, Grandpa's son said, holding his net. He was clearly after fish. Marine fish were the most valuable. Even a small one could fetch a decent price. Shells were another story. Unless you found something rare like jade snails or swimming crabs, they weren't worth much. Common stuff like white snails or hairy crabs only brought in pennies. Yang, Xiaoxi, why don't you come pick snails with me? I know a spot with tons of spicy snails. Grandma's son offered kindly. She worried that they wouldn't know what they were doing. Spicy snails were a good find, but Chu Yang had to decline. The treasure chest point wasn't in the direction she was headed. Thanks, Grandma's son, but we'll try our luck somewhere else. It's too crowded here. Okay, you two be careful and don't wander off too far, Grandma's son said, and went on her way. Once she was gone, Chu Shi asked, Bro, why didn't we go with Grandma's son? Chu Yang ruffled her hair and smiled. I'm gonna take you somewhere even better. Oh. They continued north, past the mangroves, until they reached their destination. This was a rocky beach, usually underwater. Only at low tide did the jagged rocks appear, and the refresh point was on a rock about waist high. Chu Yang opened the treasure chest. The silver treasure chest has been opened. Reward, random refresh of marine economic creatures, rare, capture time limit, 120 minutes. This time, the number of refreshes wasn't given. Instead, a band of light appeared, shining on the reef. A refresh range. He shook his head, setting aside his thoughts. He had to get to work. Chu Yang started searching under the rocks within the light zone, but couldn't find any rare seafood. Aside from mussels, clams, oysters, and sea vegetables, there were only small fish and shrimp. Then Chu Shi struggled to break off a small, dark brown thing from a rock and cried out, Hey, look. Sea chicken feet. Sea chicken feet. Chu Yang examined it. They were small sea snails, about 1.5 inches long, with bluish-brown shells. They had feet extending from the top, like claws. They clung to the rocks in clusters, their feet retracted, blending in almost perfectly. Wait a minute. When Chu Yang looked closer, his heart skipped a beat. Goose barnacles. Goose barnacles, chicken feet of the sea. That he stared at them, hardly daring to believe his eyes, and finally confirmed it, the top-shelf seafood he'd enjoyed back in his other life. He was suddenly buzzing with excitement. Looking at the clusters of barnacles between the rocks, Chu Yang could only think of one thing. Jackpot. Chapter 8. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Alright, let's get this done today. Chu Yang practically ripped out the short-handled shovel. This wasn't your typical construction site shovel. It was longer and thinner, kinda like a Luoyang shovel, but flatter. Perfect for prying off those stubborn oysters, abalone, and shellfish clinging to the reef. Motivated by the potential cash, Chu Yang was all in. He followed the cracks in the reef, and with one swift move, he pried up a whole cluster of dog-claw snails. Chu Shi, not to be outdone, was hammering away at a small reef with a pointed pickaxe. Working together, the brother and sister had soon filled half of a large feed sack. Chu Yang was wiped. Those dog-claw snails were tucked away in the rock crevices, holding on for dear life. It took every ounce of strength to pry them loose, and you had to be careful not to crack the shells and ruin their appearance. He glanced over at Chu Shi, who was also dripping sweat, her face flushed, but she was still focused on digging out those snails. Chu Yang, his lips parched, called out to Chu Shi. "Hey, Xiao Shi, take a break. Go grab another feed sack and a bottle of water." "Okay." Following Chu Yang's instructions, Chu Shi dropped the pickaxe on a flat spot on the reef and took off like a rabbit. Chu Yang massaged his aching back, thinking how unfair life was. Other main characters were like mermaid gods with iron stomachs and superhuman strength. He was stuck here, exhausted, but complaining wouldn't get him anywhere. He checked the time and realized half of their allotted time was already gone. Gotta keep digging. Shovel after shovel of dog-claw snails was being harvested from the reef. When Chu Shi returned with the water bottle, the 50-pound feed sack was already half full. "Here, bro, have some water and rest. I'll take over for a bit." "Thanks. Be careful, take it easy, and watch your hands." Chu Yang was beat and thirsty. He grabbed the water bottle from Chu Shi and gulped down half of it. Finally, he felt human again. After a quick 2-minute break, he looked at Chu Shi and knew he had to get back to it. He wasn't some trust fund kid with endless money anymore. He had to earn a living to support himself and his sister. He threw himself back into it and soon had the second feed sack more than half full. Only half an hour of system-allotted time left. Just then, Chu Yang heard someone calling his name. He looked up and saw it was Grandma Sunday. After a moment's hesitation, Chu Yang waved her over. "Hey, Grandma Sun, over here. What are you two doing out here? The waves get rough in the reef area. Gotta keep a close eye on your sister." Grandma Sun grumbled as she walked towards them, but when she got closer and saw what they were holding, she stopped mid-sentence. "Dog-claw snails. That stuff was going for $30 to $50 a pound at the dock. Forget the waves, forget the kraken. You had to grab what you could and stash it in your bag. Grandma Sun, what are you waiting for? Start digging. The tide's coming in, and they'll be gone," Chu Yang said with a smile. "Well, if you insist, I won't say no," Grandma Sun said, rubbing her hands together, a little sheepish. There were unwritten rules about working the sea. Generally, if someone was already working an area, you didn't muscle in. It was like fishing. You don't just wander over and cast your line in someone else's honey hole. That's a good way to get your butt kicked. Of course, some people had no shame, but Grandma's son wasn't one of them. "Don't be silly. You always look after Xiaoxi and me. I borrowed rice from you this morning. Get digging." Chu Yang waved her off and got back to work. "All right." Grandma's son grinned and joined in. Time flew by. Half an hour later, the densely packed snails vanished in seconds. "That's weird. There were so many just now," Grandma's son said, clearly puzzled. "Who knows? Maybe the weather changed, and they all crawled into the cracks," Chu Yang offered casually. "Could be," Grandma's son nodded, accepting Chu Yang's explanation. That's how the sea was. In the same spot, you could have a gold mine one day and nothing the next. They were lucky to have found anything at all, though she was a little disappointed. Grandma's son was happy with her haul. She'd gathered more than 10 pounds of those little barnacles. After cleaning, they'd still weigh 10 pounds, and she could get a few $100 for them at the dock. These days, the average monthly salary in the city was only around $1,500 or $1,600, but compared to what Chu Yang and his sister had, it was nothing. "Oh my God, this is heavy," Chu Yang tied off the feed sack and almost threw out his back trying to lift it. Dog claw snails weighed more than fertilizer. A 50-pound fertilizer sack full of these snails weighed 70 or 80 pounds easy. Gritting his teeth, he finally managed to haul 2 feed sacks of dog claw snails back home. On the second trip, Grandpa's son came out to help and carried the bag for a bit. Otherwise, Chu Yang would have just dumped it on the road. Some of the villagers were hanging around and saw him lugging the heavy bags. "What's that?" "A big load of something," they asked. "Just some snails I picked up," Chu Yang replied. "What kind of snails?" "Must be trash snails if they're in a bag that big," one old woman said, a hint of jealousy in her voice. Trash snails were a local term for snails with too much shell and not enough meat. No one wanted to buy them. Chu Yang ignored her. He was used to the small-town mindset. People would rather lose money themselves than see someone else get rich. If they knew how many dog claw snails he collected, they'd probably be furious all night. "I wonder if this counts as some kind of community service." Chu Yang thought to himself. Back in the yard, Chu Yang dumped the dog claw snails into the fish pond, soaking them in seawater. That way, they'd stay fresh for a few days. After cleaning up, he headed next door to Grandpa's son's house. He pushed open the door and found the old couple cleaning the seafood they'd collected. The star of the show was obviously the dog claw snails. "Yang, come on in. I'll make some tea," Grandma's son said, but Chu Yang stopped her. "Don't worry about the tea, Grandma. I was wondering if you could help me find someone with a boat I could rent for the day." "Why do you need a boat? Are you leaving the island?" "I'm planning to sell the snails I picked up today and buy some stuff in the city," Chu Yang said, not trying to hide anything. "Sell snails? Someone comes to the dock to buy them every day," Grandpa's son said. "Sell to them? What are they paying?" Chu Yang scoffed. He'd already looked into it. Someone in the village had caught dog claw snails a month ago. The seafood buyer offered 35 cents a pound. That was ridiculous. Seafood prices had gone way up by 2007. Dog claw snails weren't as expensive as they would be later, but they were still worth over $1. "You think you can get a good price in the city?" Grandpa's son was intrigued. After Chu Yang said that yes, he thought he could. He thought for a moment. "Okay, Qing has a boat. I'll ask him to take you. But..." He rubbed his hands together. "When you sell them, could you also take my wife's catch with you?" "No problem. Consider it done." Chapter 9. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Around noon, Chu was still in the kitchen, whipping up some seafood rice stew. It was simple, rice on the bottom, then shrimp, spicy snails, and baby octopus she'd foraged from the beach on top. Lid on, simmered for 10 minutes or so on high heat, and then a splash of soy sauce. Ready to eat. No fancy seasonings needed, just letting the seafood flavor shine. After lunch, when Chu was doing the dishes, Grandpa's son showed up with a burly, weathered-looking guy. This was son Qing, Grandpa's son's nephew, also from the village. "Yang, my uncle says you want to rent my boat." "Yep, Uncle Qing, need a ride to the city." Chu Yang pulled out a pack of reds and offered one to each of them. "Now that's a good smoke," son Qingjuan's eyes lit up. He held the cigarette under his nose, inhaling deeply. Sometimes, all it takes is a cigarette to turn strangers into friends, especially for son Qing. "Where's the stuff?" "My trike's parked outside." "Let's get going, early bird gets the worm." Son Qing, cigarette dangling from his lips, was already eager to get the ball rolling. Chu Yang chuckled. "Hold your horses, let's finish these smokes first." After they finished, Chu Yang led son Qing to the fish pond and pointed to 2 fertilizer sacks. "These 2 bags of snails right here." Son Qing took one look, and his eyes bugged out. "Holy cow! These are dog claw snails. A ton of them. And this big blue crab too." He nearly dropped his cigarette. "You picked all this today?" "Nah, the snails were today, the crabs were yesterday." Chu Yang replied, blowing a smoke ring. Damn, you're something else. You're living up to your reputation as the village's brainiac. I haven't seen anyone pull in this kind of haul in years. Just got lucky, Chu Yang said modestly. Enough talk, let's load him up. He grabbed one of the bulging sacks and lugged it to the tricycle bed. Chu Yang secured the sacks and a bucket of blue crabs with bungee cords, told Chu Shi to watch the house, and hopped onto the trike next to Sun Qingjun. Hang on tight, here we go. That it wasn't far to the docks, just a quick 7 or 8 minute ride on the trike. They hauled the goods onto Sun Qingjun's boat, panting. It was a beat-up, 20-foot wooden sampan with a puttering motor. Definitely not high-end. Peppa Peep. Sun Qingjun was a seasoned fisherman through and through. His arms were rock hard. He jammed the key in, cranked the engine like a madman, and got it started on the first try. He untied the cable, and the boat chugged slowly into the water. Once they hit a steady clip of about 10 knots, Chu Yang leaned back against the side. Sun Qingjun, while steering, struck up a conversation. Yang, ain't it easy making dough in the city? I hear people are raking it in just collecting scrap. That's a load of bull. It's tough all over. The high rollers make bank, but the average Joe is worse off than you are. It's a pretty sweet life having a boat and hitting the open sea. If I just got lucky and came across a school of fish one day, I'd be set for half a year. Easier said than done. Sun Qingjun shook his head. Think everyone's as lucky as you? Besides, there ain't been a school of fish in these parts for a long time. They chatted the whole way, until Falling Sun Island faded to a tiny speck. Before long, the coastline came into view. They reached the port and entered the fishery dock area. Sun Qingjun maneuvered the boat, found an empty spot, and started to pull in, but before he could tie the cable, a dockworker with a red armband appeared. Docking fee. Chu Yang asked how much. $5. Great, he hadn't even made a dime yet, and he was already down $5. Gotta pay to play, though. He pulled a $5 bill from his pocket and handed it over. The worker took the money and gave him a ticket. It had the amount and time on it. That $5 is good for 4 hours. It's 1:30 now, you gotta pay again at 5:30 if you're still here, the worker warned. Got it, Chu Yang nodded, pocketing the ticket. Sun Qingjun secured the boat, and Chu Yang moved the sacks to the bow. Soon, a fishmonger, checking out the day's haul, noticed their little sampan. Selling something? A man in his 40s, wearing a loud Hawaiian shirt and sunglasses, and carrying a satchel, stood by the bow and asked. Chu Yang nodded. Yeah, what else would we be doing here? Let's take a look. He peered into the boat. Sure thing. Chu Yang grinned. But I'm warning you, don't try lowballing me. He opened one corner of the sack for the fishmonger to peek at. Holy sh*t, that the man had the same reaction as Sun Qingjun. His jaw dropped. Am I seeing things? Dog claw snails. Chu Yang smiled proudly. Yep. Want 'em? Hell yeah, I do. The fishmonger pushed up his sunglasses, pulled out a pack of smokes, offered one to Chu Yang, lit it, and asked with a smarmy smile. Hey buddy, you got 2 full sacks of these snails. Chu Yang took a drag and blew a perfect smoke ring. Yup, a good cigarette sure beats those cheap ones. Nice. Of course, it'd take more than a cigarette to win him over. All dog claw snails. What's your offer? Hey, can I get a closer look? If it's good stuff, I'll make it worth your while. The fishmonger started to get on the boat, but Chu Yang stopped him. Hold your horses. I'll show you. He grabbed a stainless steel basin, scooped out a small pile from the sack, and set it on the edge of the boat. Take a look. All of them are over an inch. Quality like this is rare, my friend. Damn, you ain't kidding. The fishmonger grabbed a handful, examining and smelling them, almost popping them in his mouth to taste them. Finally, he said. Alright, let's cut the BS. I'll give you $2 a pound, take the whole lot. Sun Qingjun was floored. At that price, Chu Yang's snails would fetch thousands of dollars, like a fisherman's earnings for half a year, but Chu Yang wasn't having it. He snatched the snails back. Hey, 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 don't. If you don't like the price, we can talk. The fishmonger backtracked. No point. Check somewhere else. What a joke, $2 a pound. This guy thought he was some backwater hick and tried to rip him off. He's right, Lao Yu, you're being a cheapskate at $2. Another young guy in a polo shirt and jeans pushed his way to the boat, offering Chu Yang a cigarette. Hey man, have a smoke. Sell me the snails. I'll give you $4. Chapter 10. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Hold on a minute, by Pengfei, you're jumping the gun. I wasn't finished talking to the kid. You know the drill, right? That the sunglass-wearing fishmonger was fuming when Bai Pengfei cut in. Bai Pengfei wasn't about to back down. He shot the fishmonger a look and sneered, you Chuanda, you should change your name to you full of crap. You're always spouting nonsense when I'm around. Let me tell you something, your tricks don't work on me. If you're going to bid, then bid. If not, get lost. Who says it's first come, first served, asterisk that's right, star, Chu Yang mentally gave Bai Pengfei a thumbs up, bidding was perfect, it would drive the price up, the human instinct to watch a good show is universal. Seeing the commotion, a dozen people rushed over. The dock was full of fishmongers who had initially come to see what was happening, but once they heard what the argument was about, they were instantly interested. Goose barnacles, a rare find, and reselling them meant big profits. That's right, you either buy them or don't. If you're not going to, someone else will, someone called out. Another, unable to resist, said directly to Chu Yang, hey, I'll give you $85. Sell them to me. Bullshit, I never said I wasn't going to buy them, you Chuanda, the sunglass-wearing fishmonger, retorted angrily. Now that a crowd had gathered, he knew he couldn't avoid paying a premium. If it were ordinary seafood, fine, maybe people would give him a break, but with something as valuable as goose barnacles, his reputation meant squat. 90. I'll give you 90, you Chuanda announced, looking around, hoping to scare off the competition, but Bai Pengfei immediately countered, you full of crap, you're such a cheapskate, adding $5 at a time. After mocking you Chuanda, he turned to Chu Yang, holding up one finger, then two. Hey kid, 120, I'll take them all. He added, 120 isn't bad, ask around at the market. Chu Yang looked at the others who had been bidding, now silent, and knew he was telling the truth, and he was okay with that price. Compared to the village dock, it was more than 3 times the value. Of course, pushing for a higher price would be even better. You, Bai just offered 120, you still in? Hell no, you Chuanda muttered, glaring at Bai Pengfei, then at Chu Yang, before finally turning away in frustration. 120 was close to his wholesale price, he wouldn't make much reselling them, he could only sell it at a higher price in the port city, but business across the sea was not something ordinary people could touch. After a moment of silence, no one else made an offer. Chu Yang extended his hand to Bai Pengfei. Deal. Ha. You got it. Bai Pengfei shook his hand with a smile. After settling the price, he pulled out his phone and made a call. It was a real Nokia N95. Soon, a young man in a rubber coat and boots drove up on a tricycle. It was Bai Pengfei's buddy. The young man grabbed a scale from the back, zeroed it with the basket, and poured the goose barnacles into the frame. There were so many that one basket wasn't enough. He weighed them 3 times in total and then got the final weight, 102.5 kilos, 205 jin. That was way more than Chu Yang had expected. 205 jin, comes to 24,600 yuan, there you go. Bai Pengfei handed over a stack of bills. Chu Yang took it, and without hesitation, he licked his finger, and counted them one by one. It was always better to settle in cash to avoid disputes later. 243, 244, 245, 246. 24,006, yep, correct, cash was the way to go. Chu Yang felt reassured holding the stack of bills in his hands. Unlike his previous life, when he could drop thousands in a bar in one night with just a beep from a payment app, and barely even notice it. He tucked the money in a plastic bag and stuffed it inside his clothes. Chu Yang asked Bai Pengfei where he could find an agricultural bank. After getting directions, he spoke to Sun Qingjun and prepared to deposit the money, but Sun stopped him. "Hey, what about this?" That he pointed to a plastic bucket beside the cabin. Chu Yang smacked his forehead, nearly forgetting about it. He brought the bucket over to Bai Pengfei. "Boss Bai, I've got a few blue crabs here. You want them?" Bai Pengfei opened the lid, and his smile widened. "Those are some big wild blue crabs." Chu Yang didn't hesitate, and he didn't lowball the price either. For blue crabs, the biggest was almost 2 caddies, and the other 3 were over 1, totaling 5 caddies and 7 ounces, making it 1,140 yuan. Bai Pengfei counted out 12 bills and handed them to Chu Yang. "Hey man, give me your number, call me next time you find something good." Chu Yang didn't refuse. He needed a reliable buyer like Bai Pengfei. After they exchanged numbers, Chu Yang made sure nothing was missing and climbed back onto the dock. He found a branch of ABC, deposited 22,000 yuan, and kept 3,800 yuan in cash on him. Chu Yang checked his account balance, 5253.18, not bad. His past self had left him a little over 28,000 yuan. In this day and age, a young guy with 50,000 yuan in the bank was doing okay. 10 years later, most young people wouldn't be so lucky. Many would be in debt to online lenders. After securing his card and cash, Chu Yang walked out of the bank and stood on the roadside, waiting for a ride. Suddenly, a red and black motorcycle screeched to a halt in front of him. "Hey, where you headed, good lookin'?" Chu Yang looked up, seeing the scene. The rider, wearing slippers, balanced himself on one foot, his unbuttoned shirt flapping in the wind. He gripped the handlebars with one hand and rested his elbow on the gas tank, which was emblazoned with DYUN. Chu Yang grinned. "Now that's a cool motorcycle guy." That with this motorcycle, life would be even brighter. Before his rebirth, Chu Yang had been obsessed with Hong Kong movies and especially with actresses like Cecilia Cheung in King of Comedy. He had a vivid memory of the Dayun motorcycle she endorsed, especially the phrase, "win the world, Dayun motorcycle," that they would say before the weather forecast every night. "So cool!" Chu Yang exclaimed. The motorcycle taxi driver was stoked to hear the praise. "Knew you were a real one, you must have good taste. But don't think you're getting a free ride just 'cause you said I was cool. Maybe I'll give you 20% off. Hurry up, hop on."